everyone, and welcome to part 4 of our localization tutorial series. We're going to go ahead and jump right back in where we left off. So in this class we still have quite a bit to do, but before we get started I want to go ahead and create a resource manager, at least a reference to one. So let's go ahead and do resource, or actually private static resource manager, and we got to add the using system.resources. And in case you don't know how to do that, if you're using Visual Studio, you can click Control period whenever there's an error, and it will tell you the best way to fix it, if there is one. And then we're going to call this underscore strings, because this resource manager is only going to save our strings. If you go to create other types of objects, or if you want all of your objects to be just objects, like an object class like lowercase object, or however you spell it. I don't know if I spelled that correctly. I know how to spell it, I just don't know how I spelled it in my head. Either way, if you want different types, or to have that very general type, that would be fine as well. I'm pretty sure, but they would all be saved to the exact same file. I want all the strings to be saved to a very specific file called strings. It's going to actually be called strings dot. It's going to have the culture name, which is, like for the United States, it's going to be EN-U, a capital U, capital S, and then dot resources, because it's going to save them as resources files. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and create some more private static read-only fields, I guess. So this is going to be private static read only, and these are going to be strings for the most part. This one is going to be file underscore format, all caps, because it is read only, so it's going to be like a constant. And we're going to say equals, and it's going to be argument 0, point argument 1, point argument 2. And then, let's see, do I want to do that? No, I won't have the .2. I'll just put resources. Okay, so this is going to take a file name and then a culture name. So we're going to go ahead and define the file name, which will be private static read-only string file name, or file base strings. Oh, we'll say file name strings equals, no, I'll say file base, because it's really just the base name of the thing. So this will just say strings. Okay, so then the last thing that we need to do is create a resource directory. So let's go ahead and go up here, private static read only string resource underscore directory equals, I do path dot, oops, my bad, path, which is using system.io dot combine, and do application dot streaming assets path with res. Okay, so I use the path dot combine. All it really does is adds a forward slash between the streaming assets path and the res, like the res part. So all it's really going to add is this between the two of them. I just prefer it. I don't really have a reason why, but I just like having it as a method. Either way, now this will work for Windows, but this isn't going to work for Android, and the reason being is because Android will take that streaming assets folder and turn it into a jar file, which is essentially like a zip folder. So what we need to do is, for Android, is to actually unload that jar file and save it in a different directory. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, have it have the exact same name, and I'm going to change this to persistent data path or with res as well. And then I'm going to put it in a directive saying if Unity editor or Unity standalone, which is going to say if it's on a PC, Mac, or in the editor, use the resource directory with streaming assets. Otherwise, so elif Unity Android, use the persistent data path. And then we're going to say hashtag endif. Okay, so this will have a string with the exact same name, but depending on what it's running on. So if it runs on Android, it's not going to do this. This is why this is grayed out, because this is not running unless it's Unity Android, which it's not. But once it runs on an Android phone, this is what will get ran, and resource directory will equal this. It's like saying if the application's type is Android, then set this. It's called the directive, and this is how you get some code to run, some code not. But it's going to be used quite a bit in this tutorial series. Last thing I'm going to do is go ahead and exit that off. But then we need to go ahead and initialize this so we can set the strings resource manager. So let's go ahead and say public void initialize. And we're going to first put an L there, make that static. Okay, so there is something called thread.culture. Okay, let me just add this. Thread.currentThread culture or current culture equals, and then I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste that because I want the UI culture to reference it as well. UI culture equals system culture. So what this will do is it will tell the resource manager that the default culture is going to be the system culture. So whenever you make a reference to get strings or whatever, it's going to reference this culture. And that depends how you set up your system. I don't think the way we set up the system this is really going to be a problem, but we're going to just assume that it is. And then strings is going to equal a new resource manager. Okay, actually it's going to equal a resource manager dot create file based resource manager. The base name is going to be file base strings. The resource directory is going to be the resource directory. And then it says using a resource set. No, it's not going to be using a resource set. So we're going to say null or mul, whatever. Okay. And that's going to create a resource manager. However, I want to go ahead and throw a directive in here because when I initialize the system, I also want the I want Android to initial or to open that jar file. So I'm going to have that taken care of as well inside this initialize method. So Android initialize. Alright, so I think that's enough for this video, but I'm going to go ahead and create that method with you guys in the next one, so go ahead and join me then. And then we're going to talk about implementing the getString method, and then we're going to talk about implementing some of the methods that we're going to be using inside the editor, or like an editor. It's going to be inside Unity editor, how we're going to be doing it at the time when it's not going to be a runtime method, and I'll explain that in the next video.